Hello, welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Tensions are high ahead of Saturday's Victory Day parade in Moscow. President Zelenskyy, citing a broken truce, warned of long-range sanctions, a threat seemingly realized today with reported strikes deep inside Russia, including Perm and Yaroslavl. As the Kremlin threatens retaliatory strikes on Kyiv if tomorrow's celebrations are disrupted, we are joined by Yevheniia Kravchuk, Deputy Chair of the Ukrainian Parliamentary Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to start our conversation by bringing up the latest information from President Zelenskyy and his daily updates. And it appears that he says in his address that tomorrow, i.e. the victory parade in Moscow, depends on what we hear today, very much suggesting that if Russia is striking upon Ukraine today, then it's entirely likely that this victory parade in Moscow will indeed be disrupted by Ukraine. So that is the latest that we have heard from President Zelenskyy. And I wanted to just begin our conversation by asking you personally what you think may happen tomorrow.
Well, obviously tomorrow it will be, sort of a parade of fear. And, it's clearly now the picture shows that even the foreign leaders do not wish to come to Moscow. And that's actually the result of this war of aggression, the isolation of Russian Federation. Because in, the old times, especially before 2022, there was a wide range of different political leaders coming to Moscow for the 9th of May. Ukraine, together with Europe, celebrates the Victory Day over the Nazism on the 8th. So it's today. And tomorrow we have Europe Day, as well as other countries on the European continent. So tomorrow only, I think it's like 9 or 8 politicians will come to the parade, and out of them only 3 can actually be representatives of, official representatives of the country. There'll be no Chinese representatives, I think, for the first time in many, many years. And, you'll have the Abkhazia, South Ossetia, which are basically occupied parts in Caucasus, and also 3 representatives out of Republic Srpska, which is part of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it also shows that Russia and Putin himself and Kremlin cares about this, outside looks, and the Victory Day had been like source of legitimacy of this regime for many years. But it also shows the fears of the regime, and obviously it's not the picture they wanted to see in 2026 when they started the full-scale invasion in 2022, asking Zelenskyy not to send drones over the Kremlin.
Indeed. So it's very much like the Kremlin wants to keep up its appearances. I just wanted to emphasize to our viewers that there will be no military hardware, no members of the Duma. Like you mentioned, there will be no significant guests, not even China, only Lukashenko from Belarus, no major war veterans. And also, I wanted to also emphasize that there will be complete internet shutdown, no possibility to send text messages. Moscow is really a very big city of 12 million people. And if you include the suburbs, it makes it up to 20 to 22 million people. What does this send in terms of a message to the Russians? What kind of reaction do you think that the Russians will express as regular civilians?
Well, it's really painful to see all of these videos coming from Russia when they complain about the shut down internet or slow internet, or they have to use VPN for Telegram or other services. So they did not really care, especially in 2022 when the full-scale invasion started, that the regime decided to kill civilians to occupy the independent state. state. But when it comes to their own uncomfort, or when they cannot leave the airport to go to Egypt for the May holidays, that's something they complain, not complaining that their own country is killing kids in their cribs. So I don't really feel sorry about the slow internet or no internet in Moscow. But it also shatters this myth of the almighty Kremlin. And I think even ordinary Russians that only, see the state TV channels, they start to understand that something's wrong, and Russia is becoming a pariah, obviously, in the international eyes.
I also wanted to ask, what do you think about the Russians now being aware of the fact that Ukraine is essentially able to strike deep into the Russian territory whenever and wherever it wants? Is this something that the Russians are now acutely aware of?
There was, I think it's, sort of an anecdote out of social media, but it was sort of a comment of an ordinary Russian saying, well, how come Putin cannot negotiate with Ukraine to come back to the times when we could bomb them and Ukraine could not bomb us? And that's actually, everything says about the whole understanding of the broader picture. So bombing Ukrainian cities, destructing, damaging the critical infrastructure, so people would be left without electricity and heating during the winter when the temperature drops down to -20, it's okay. But when the drones are somewhere on the oil refinery and you can see the smoke from your window, well, that's something disturbing. And I think that the deep strikes, which are now like 1,500 kilometers, 200 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers, it's something that cannot be covered by state propaganda because it's in your window, and it's not, sort of Belgorod, which is very close to Ukrainian border, or Kursk. So it's, there are like no safe places in the in the reach of 1,500 kilometers. And of course, now the Russians, the ordinary Russians, are experiencing the economical troubles because the military economy could not stay for forever. So of course, at one point, the boost that and the money that was sent to military part of economy help the overall economy to sustain. But it's not longer the case. The reserves are not there. And also the deep strikes that reach oil refineries and different ports from which the export of oil was done, it also has a direct influence. So basically, it's probably the most effective sanctions.
Now, I wanted to move on to the peace talks that are struggling to move along. What are the inferences so far that Rustem Umerov's meeting with Steve Witkoff, what kind of conclusions do we know of so far? President Zelenskyy suggests that it was productive, but what we know so far is that the US envoys will be visiting Kyiv, that there are some prisoners of war exchanges that are on the way, and that perhaps President Trump might be visiting Kyiv. But in terms of the negotiations, is there anything else that perhaps has emerged? Do you know of anything aside from that? Because the latest also that has come out of the US is Marco Rubio stating that there are concerns whether or not the war is actually productive for the US, which signals some concern, obviously, here in the region and for Ukraine, obviously.
Well, if you come to US and Russia, Kremlin and Putin himself is afraid of the US and the military power of US, the overall influence of US, the economical power of US. But I don't see that United States had used all of the tools and instruments to influence Russia to actually want the negotiations. We also had the statement, I think it was Ushakov, who is the assistant to so-called president of Russian Federation, saying that we're not even sitting at the table before Ukraine leaves its own territory, which, you can understand how ridiculous it sounds, asking or not ordering Ukrainians to leave the unoccupied territories. And of course, we'll be happy to welcome any of the envoys or any of the officials of the U.S. coming to Ukraine. Ukraine had been open to different types and sorts and formats of negotiations, but so far the only solid result is basically the prisoners exchanges. And it doesn't really happen only because as a result of negotiations. It also includes all the hard work that Ukrainian army makes to actually have the prisoners of war from Russian side to be exchanged. So we still need to give or to return prisoners of war that are from Russian Federation in terms of having our people coming back. So it's still mutual swaps. It's not something that Russia decides, to let people go. And of course, it doesn't include strongly enough the civilian detainees. Civilians should not be in prisons in any case. They're not part of the of the exchange by the Geneva Convention. They should not be imprisoned. But there are thousands of Ukrainian civilians that are being kept in Russian prisons or in occupied territories by fake allegations. Among them, media workers, journalists, among them, local government officials, and even workers of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And they have not been released by this time.
Do you have concerns that the US may pull out of these negotiations if we hear things like Rubio saying the United States remains prepared to be a mediator to end the war in Ukraine if it, i.e. the war, can be productive, but added that Washington does not want to waste time if the effort is not moving forward? Just very briefly as we wrap up.
Well, the effort is not moving forward because of Russia. So if the Washington, D.C. does not push on Russia and other countries do not push on Russia, then these efforts will not come out of nowhere, out of blue. So I think the next packages of sanctions are really important, but also the strong position from the U.S., because obviously mediation is not enough in this case.
Okay, Yevheniia Kravchuk, Deputy Chair of the Ukrainian Parliamentary Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all for World Talks right now. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay with us on TVP World for more. Goodbye.